Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me today on this webinar, When Staff Leave, What Goes With Them. So it's a really big topic, but it's going to be about 20 to 30 minutes. But my name's Giles and I'm the founder of Syn-Star. And over the next 20 to 30 minutes, I want to walk you through something that most businesses only think about after it's gone wrong. What actually happens to access and data when someone leaves your business? So we will be having a Q&A session at the end, so please do use the chat, the Q&A function within the meeting, and feel free to ask your questions as we go through, and then I'll come to the Q&A at the end. So let's jump straight in. So your biggest security risk isn't outside of your business, it's the people who used to work in the business, because ultimately it's all about how much security, how much data, how much information, how much access have they still got. So most of the security conversations is pointed outwardly. So you think about things like phishing attacks, and you might think, oh, actually, I've got a good firewall to stop people from getting in, or a ransomware attack. But one of the biggest risks sits inside the business already. And that's the people who currently either work for you, but they've got all of the information and security is dotted all over the place, or it's the people that no longer work for you, but who still got access to certain things, and that you didn't realize wasn't, whether it was access that wasn't closed off or whether it's data that they've still got access to. So on that, a quick gut check for you all. Think of the last person who left your business. Are you certain right now that every login, every shared folder, every app they ever had access to was closed the day they left the business? So hold that thought. That's the thing you really need to think about. And as we're going through, also it may prompt some questions. So what we're covering today is essentially 3 parts. Each of them is relatively quick but practical, and that's the important thing. So first is the access gap. What actually stays open after someone leaves and why it happens even in well-run businesses. Second, then we'll look at what good looks like, and it's a real process that we'll go through. And then the third is I'll turn it back to you with 3 questions that will be worth asking about your own setup. So this isn't a sales pitch, it's the same framework we use for clients, but this is all about going through how to best do it, and then you guys being able to drop the questions into the chat as we go along. So first, it's the access gap. This is the problem. So part 1, the access gap, the story. So think about this. A sales manager left on good terms. They returned their laptop. The exit interview was done. And then 8 weeks later, their personal email still had live access to a shared folder. Access has been built up over 3 years, and the access was given one piece at a time. And that's a really important thing to remember. When they needed access to certain things, someone from IT would go in and give them that access that they needed as and when, because they're within the business, they were a trusted employee. Their MFA was all set up and linked with their personal phone. So of course, when they left the business, so did their personal phone. And they had a personal record of passwords because they were saving them on their personal phone. So there's the scenario. So then if we think about how to apply it, because this is a person that's worked for that business for a long time, for a number of years. So you need to think about, imagine in 10 years, imagine if you've got employees that have worked for you for 10 years, imagine how your business has evolved in those 10 years. The software that you used to use compared to the software now. You may have only been using emails, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. 10 years ago, whereas now you've got 10 different platforms, you've got 20 different vendors that you're using that all have access from this salesperson. So you really need to think about the evolution of a business and then how you effectively get that security bloat or bleed. So, okay, so how to apply it. So personal, emailed and shared drives. Permissions were granted individually over the years, not reviewed as a whole. Devices. So not just the laptop that they had from the business, they also laptop for personal use. So they may have been working from home. They had a personal laptop and you could have just gone, oh, actually, we'll set up access so that you can dial in from a personal machine as well as the business machine. They've got their personal phone with emails installed on it because it makes sense if they're traveling, then that they can access their work emails. They might have a VPN set up, so as in a virtual private network that can dial into the business. And they might have saved MFA tokens, so as in multi-factor authentication, whereby, you know, you can tick the little box to say, save this device. So have they got any of those that are saved on their personal laptop that's obviously personal, so they've still got full access to it. And then the data that walks. This is exports in downloads, saved browser passwords, personal cloud storage. All of these things are synced with work folders that are all on their personal device as well as being on their business device. You've kept the business device because it was a very happy, amicable split, but they've still got a lot of stuff that's on their personal device where they've used it over the years because they were just being handy because they were a really good employee. So, right, so what does good look like? And it's all about having a process, not a scramble. And that's really the big thing. So if we take about, we've got the access gap at the moment, which is the issues that we've got. Effectively, we've got bits and pieces of data that we don't really know because they're not all clustered together. So there's various things that this employee that no longer works for you may still have access to. So what does good look like? If we look at the story, so contrast that, the previous story, with a client where HR tells the IT department the moment a resignation is confirmed, not the last day, and that's the key. As soon as a resignation is confirmed, access removal turns on a fixed clock. And this is really important. So it's not whenever someone remembers. It's just all about having a predefined checklist that's triggered automatically as soon as someone leaves, and it's not working on someone's memory. So it's not going, oh yeah, do you remember that access that we gave them this one time? And then trying to work backwards and then realizing that actually they've got admin access to certain things. So it's all about having a process in place before they leave. But before that, it's actually whenever a new starter or current starters, you need to have a log of all the information that people have got access to. So that then if they leave, you can then cross-reference, you know what they've got access to, and then you can then look at how you can restrict the access. So there's two different ways, but the main thing is it's actually first of all understanding it. Exactly the same with if you give out uniform, in theory, if you say that they had 10 shirts when they started, you would expect 10 shirts to come back. It's very similar to that in terms of it's just making sure that you know everything that they've got. So how do you apply this? It's about, first of all, having an access register. It's a current list that continuously gets updated, and that's the first thing, having that current list so you know everything that's there, all the different bits of software that the person's using. Part of the IT should be already that you have a restraint on what software people are allowed to use. So in theory, if you know exactly all the software that the people have got as they're an employee, then when they then become an ex-employee, we know exactly what they were using and we can go through everything, making sure that we kill the access to everything. And that's the important thing. But when we say we want to kill access to everything, what is that everything? So access register. Then you've got a defined removal timeline. And this really depends on the business and the role that the person does, because you're obviously going to have some people that might just have a Microsoft email address, in which case then relatively straightforward, we can kill their access and log them out of any existing logins that they've got, and then it's pretty clean and tidy. But if you've got lots of different software, if you've got various hardware that they're using, if they're using supplier websites, if they're able to purchase different things, all of that side of it, because it's a lot going on, you really need to just know everything so that you can go through it. Obviously, you've got the device wipe confirmation. So again, if they're using a company device and that's all they use, and you've restricted to a company device, then obviously this access side of things is much cleaner and tidier. But for example, we want to be able to remotely wipe their laptop, and also that includes MDM, which is mobile device management. So an example could be that you give the person or your team a laptop and a mobile phone. So we need to make sure that we as the IT department needs to make sure that you're in complete control of those devices so that we can remotely wipe them, or we can at least lock them down so that the data is safe. And then obviously the real big thing is to make sure that part of the process is that you've got the exit paperwork. So it's that sign off, making sure that everything was ticked, all of the different access and the software that they had access to, all of that was signed off and done. And then you make sure that there's always a signature at the bottom of that sign off so that you know exactly who's done it, when it was done, and that it's been done thoroughly. And that's really, really important. Now, none of this is expensive or complicated. It's just around having the discipline and a checklist. That's it. And it's making sure that these things are triggered as soon as someone leaves, or soon as someone offers their resignation. Sometimes it could be the same day. You might have a policy where as soon as someone resigns, you put them on gardening leave, in which case then the process needs to follow that. But it's making sure you've got the access register that shows all the software, all the hardware that they use. We would always recommend certain tools like Microsoft Intune that can really tie these things in, but there are lots of various tools available for things like that remote ability to be able to click a button and you can nuke access to everything. But there's always going to be individual logins for things. And that's where really making sure that you've got, you as a business are giving people individual logins for certain software. If at the moment you might, for example, have software that people share the logins because maybe you just want to save a bit of money on the license cost, because it might only be software that you use sporadically. The downfall of that is, of course, if you've got one account that's an admin account and you've got 5 different people sharing those details and one of those people leaves, then of course there's that potential of how do you get rid of their access. So obviously you could reset the password, but what if the person that leaves have got the multi-factor authenticator on their device? So this is why you just need to sort of really think about all these different edges to begin with, so that then it's just nice and smooth and it's not panic when someone does actually leave. So obviously in an ideal world, people will leave in a nice manner, will be able to uninstall their devices and things, and it'll all be fine. But obviously we know that that doesn't always happen. So, okay, so the 3 questions. So let's turn it back to you for a minute. There's no need to answer out loud. Just be honest with yourself. And these are the 3 questions that are worth asking. This will really help you with the process. So first of all, do you know right now exactly what access your last leaver still has? That's a big question. And that's something that you should be asking, whether you can ask everyone that's involved in the technology, but in the HR of the business. So what access does your last leaver still have? And hopefully you'll be thinking, well, hopefully they've got no access, but it's the question of, is that 100%? The next one is, if someone resigned today, is there a defined process, or does it depend on someone remembering? And this is a powerful thing, because what should happen is as soon as someone resigns, it should trigger a process. And ultimately, the process should be that you look at the list of software and access that they've currently got, and you just go down that list, making sure that you're killing the different bits of access. Obviously, if you haven't done the work up front and got that list of access, then this step is going to be a bit harder, and it will be a case of people remembering and working it out. But then the last step is, when did you last check who still has access to something they no longer need? And this is where we can end up getting bloat over time. An example could be is when people move roles within your business. That is often when people end up having access to things that they no longer need for the role they're doing today. As your business grows, what you should have is a pre-agreed list of access that people need, the level of access within. So for example, if it's to do with a marketing platform, you might have people that are full admins and other people that are just read and write and doing edits. But generally, it's all about pre-planning in advance and then making sure that there's a proper process throughout for if someone wants additional access as they go along, because they might not need it now, but then they move into a role, suddenly it's, oh, actually, yeah, can I have access to all this new stuff? But then the old stuff stays open. So we want to have that process in place so that as you move people around your business, you're continuously going, right, let's check now what they've got access to. How can we kill it? And that's the big thing. And then you're constantly keeping it really, really lean. And of course, it's also a good thing for the business, because often you can end up paying for software that the person doesn't even need to use. So it's just a really good process. And obviously we would always recommend that if you're in a quarterly rhythm with your team, where you sit down with every team member every quarter, there's no reason why this access can't be directly part of that quarterly review, biannual review, or at least bare minimum annual review. But certainly it needs to trigger as and when you promote someone or you move, or someone moves department. You need that list to be updated as you go along. That's the really big thing. So in terms of your offboarding checklist, this is all about closing those gaps. And you've dealt with the biggest inside out risk most before the business. So what you need to do is you need to, within your offboarding checklist, you need to make sure that first of all, you've got a current access register, because that's what you're going to use when the person leaves. So first bit of work, get that register all put together. Then you need to look at setting a fixed timeline. And this is really important. Set the timeline and give someone full accountability for it. Then you've got to confirm that every device has been wiped. And this is where BYOD, which is bring your own device, it can be tricky. This is why we as IT and cybersecurity people would always recommend that the business provides the users with the devices, because if it's business owned, the business can do what they want with it. They can click a button and nuke the access. If it's a personally owned one, you're really limited. And it even goes down to the fact that are you even allowed to look at the device? And this is where, you can be quite careful on it. So ideally, the strongest cybersecurity is making sure that it's always company owned devices. And if they're using their personal mobile, then that's when you need to make sure that you're using business governed software on the mobile. So for example, a password manager that is run by the business, because with a password manager that's governed by the business, it will make sure that passwords are always put into the password manager, make sure they're really long, horrible passwords, make sure that no one can have the same password in more than one place. It can run your multi-factor authenticator. And then if the person leaves, we can kill access to that password manager, which effectively means that the person's personal mobile is now not able to be used for multi-factor logins. And of course, without going too cybersecurity wise, all of your software hopefully has multi-factor login anyway. So that's a really good one. So having a company run password manager is a really good step, really good bit of software. They're not expensive either per user per month. So it's, you know, we would definitely say have a password manager that can sort of underline all of this, because of course then you can audit everything throughout, because it's running software that's run and managed by the business. It's really, really important. So, so yeah, digress slightly, but yeah, confirm every device is wiped, keep exit paperwork on file, and then review lingering access periodically. So this is essentially, you should as a process be reviewing what software people are using, what software people have got access to. Are you paying per user licenses, in which case you should definitely be reviewing it, because you're going to be wasting money. But it all wraps into that initial part, which is a current asset register. So, sorry, access register. So you've got an asset register, which is all your devices and hardware and everything from the business. And then an access register sits within that same function. So you know exactly what people are using, what they can see, etc., etc. So it's really, really important for that. So as we come towards the end of this webinar, we do have created a lever checklist for you that should hopefully help. So again, you can always fire your phone at this QR code and it will take you straight to the page to download it. On the flip side, you can always just email us and we can send you a link for this, or it can be found on our website, which is syn-star.co.uk, and you can then go to our learning centre, and I believe we've got over 25 downloadable checklists and things. We've also literally got hundreds of blogs and lots of other webinars and things that you can really sink your teeth into. So here's my contact details in case you wanted to reach out and help us. We will do questions and answers in a second, and I can see that there's been some coming through in the chat as I've been doing it, so we will do Q&A in a second. But yeah, if you did want to get in contact with me, great place for me is on LinkedIn. So you can find me just Giles Cleverly, or you can look up Syn-Star, which is just Syn-Star IT support. If you search that, you'll find us on LinkedIn, all of the major social networks. If you did want to go through anything with me directly and book an IT review, then you can scan that QR code, and then you can book some time in your diary with me directly. So let's look at some questions. So here we go. We have right, here we go. Right, so how do I minimize what they can see before they finish? Well, that is a really good question, actually. It's that limbo time, isn't it? It's the time between when they say I'm leaving, here's my resignation letter, to the day they leave. And obviously it also depends on what sort of industry you're in, because you don't want them to necessarily have access to trade secrets if they were going to one of your competitors. So first of all, we would always start with, do you have permission profiles set up? And what that will allow is, for example, you could have the person has only got read and write access, or the ability to read and write. They can't delete anything, or they can't download that data. So that would certainly be one of the first things that you can really sort of minimize, so they can only see the basics. Obviously, depending on what industry you're in and the job that they're doing, you are going to have to still give them certain access. But again, this is why a lot of businesses will more opt for gardening leave as soon as someone, you know, offers their resignation. So it's always a difficult one for me to give an exact answer, but I would definitely say you can go in and just make sure that anyone that leaves, by default, the day they hand their resignation in, you take away any admin privileges. But as long as you've got different software on the machines, then with that software, you can, you know, get a full audit trail of what they've done. Obviously, you know, within contracts, there's non-compete clauses and things like that, but often, you know, how much aggro do you want to go through? You know, if someone does do something once they've left the business, sometimes you're better off to spend your energy and time just focusing on building up or training a new person. But yeah, definitely have that full audit functionality. I say certain software, you can definitely kill access to someone and eject them, log them out. Other software you may not be able to. It all depends on the software, the person, etc., etc. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer exactly without, you know, knowing more of the sort of the background and the details. So right, I think that's everything. Just the one question. If anyone else has got any questions for me. No, as I say, my details are there. Do feel free to reach out. My email address, giles@syn-star.co.uk. Find me on the social media networks. Yes, so thank you very much for watching, and do check out our Learning Centre for more webinars.